Evening, everybody. So tonight, I think, is our third How to Meditate session. So as usual, before we get into it, let's just do a few minutes meditation on the breath. Since this is since the topic's meditation, we might spend a few extra minutes meditating on the breath. 4 or 5. So just sit in your best meditation posture. Remember the main points. If you're sitting on the floor, in cross-legged position, in half lotus or full lotus, whatever cross-legged position works for you. If you're sitting in a chair, try to keep your feet flat on the floor, or if they don't reach the floor, put them on a cushion so that they're resting on something, your feet. And keep your back straight, your neck slightly bent forward. And then your arms a little bit out from your side, and your hands in your lap, right on top of your left. I don't know how that comes out. With the tips of your thumbs touching, and then resting. Anyway, resting in your lap. And your shoulders should be level, not one higher than the other, parallel with the floor. Your eyes should be lightly closed or very slightly open. And your lips are also lightly closed. Keep your lower jaw relaxed. Don't clench your teeth, And rest the tip of your tongue against the front of your hard palate, just behind your top teeth. So I think those are the main 7 points of the meditation posture. So then bring your mind inside, away from external objects of distraction. And then once you've brought your mind in, keep it away from internal objects of distraction, mainly the chattering, scattered mind that wants to run here and there, chasing after one thought or another. And find your breath. So sort of anchor your mind to your breath, where it goes out and comes in through your nostrils. So you don't have to breathe in any special way, just breathe normally. But pay attention to your breath. And you can just feel it where it goes out and comes in. So that's where we focus. So while we try to keep the main part of our mind, 95% of our mind focused on the breath, there's a little part of the mind, 4 or 5%, a little corner of the mind sort of watching like a sentry for distractions. And as soon as this vigilant mind notices a distraction coming on the horizon or wherever, kind of deflects it so that it doesn't disturb the main part of your mind, which remains on your breath. So this is one of the skills we have to try and develop in our meditation practice. However, if the sentry goes to sleep, doesn't notice, and you find your mind has wandered off on some thought or other, then whatever it was that distracted you, just drop it. Don't get involved with that at all. And just come straight back to your breath and start over. Another thing that some people find helpful is to count your breaths. So you don't have to count in and out, 1, 2. You can count every in-breath or every out-breath as 1. 2. So breathe through your nose. So, don't make a big deal of counting, just sort of count in the back of your mind. And that's one way of assessing your progress over a period of time, to see how high you can count before you do get distracted. So, I guess that's quite a lot of things to think about, as well as the breath. But anyway, those are some of the elements we need to work on as we're developing a practice. And finally, just before you start on meditating on the breath, generate a strong determination. Think, now I'm going to focus on my breath without allowing myself to get distracted by anything whatsoever. So with that strong determination, focus on your breath and try and keep your mind there. Okay, thank you. So now let's just generate a bodhicitta motivation for the session. Think, the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings out of suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself. And my reaching enlightenment depends on my studying, practicing, and accomplishing the entire path to enlightenment. And that depends on understanding and working with my mind. And that can only be done through meditation. Therefore, I'm going to participate in this class called How to Meditate in order to understand and develop my mind to enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So very briefly like that, we generate the highest positive motivation for this evening's session, bodhicitta motivation, mind of enlightenment. Always bearing in mind we're doing it for the sake of others. So although we derive incredible benefit from this practice and, of course, the ultimate benefit of enlightenment ourselves, the main reason we're doing it is not for our own benefit, but for the benefit of others, so that we can benefit others in the highest possible way by leading them to enlightenment. Okay, thank you. So we're basing this short series on Kathleen MacDonald's book, How to Meditate. So near the beginning here, she gives some advice for beginners. Regular practice. In order to experience the benefits of meditation, it's necessary to practice regularly, as with any activity. It's not possible to succeed unless we dedicate our energy wholeheartedly to it. So I think we can see from our brief experience of trying to meditate on the breath that, we can't just say, okay, now I'm going to meditate on my breath without distraction, and then it just happens. So, and I've talked many times about two kinds of meditation, concentrative meditation and analytical meditation. So concentrative meditation is also called stabilizing meditation, stabilizing our mind on a single-pointed concentration, or placement meditation, placing our mind on an object and keeping it there. So placement meditation is really replacement meditation, because, we place our mind, it goes off, we have to replace it, goes off, we have to replace it. So, we can only develop that through constant practice. And also, as I've said many times, constant practice of meditation itself isn't enough, although it's obviously essential. We need to lead a lifestyle, a life conducive to successful meditation For example, if we smoke, then it's we're not really going to be able to develop meditation because we have this chemical need that we keep reinforcing. And of course, then there are many other bad habits that we have that we need to purify, and there are other practices we need to do along with the actual practice of meditation to enrich our mind, creating merit, as it's called. So and when I'm talking about meditation here, I'm talking about formal meditation, what we've just been doing, sitting on your meditation cushion or your meditation place and shutting everything out, focusing on your mind, But we can't spend most of our life doing that. So through learning about our own mind, informal meditation, getting to know how it works, what it does, what it likes to do, it can help us be aware of our mind the rest of the time when we're not sitting in formal meditation, and essentially engage in informal meditation when we're doing our job or eating or talking to people or whatever we're doing. Always being aware of what's going on in our mind and trying to stop our mind creating negative karma, and and constantly trying to remember what I said at the beginning. The purpose of my life is to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So, is this what I'm doing now or not? Am I getting closer to enlightenment or further from enlightenment? So, sounds like a bit of a buzzkill to always have to be checking up on your mind and stopping it doing stuff we enjoy. But if we're enjoying stuff out of attachment, we're actually harming ourselves, even though we think, our mind might think, our attachment thinks we're benefiting ourselves. So, it's a bit of a full-time job, really, trying to understand and control our mind. And there are so many other things we have to do to support our life that it can be hard to keep our mind on our mind. So still, we have to decide what's important and give that priority. So she says, necessary to practice regularly, as with any activity, not possible to succeed unless we dedicate our energy wholeheartedly to it. Try to meditate every day or at least several times a week. So if we can, if we're beginning, if we can do 5 or 10 minutes of this just breathing meditation in the morning, when we get up, even you sit up in your bed and do it, it's better than not doing it. But, we'll come to it in a minute. But, and then another short meditation on the breath and maybe a little purification at night before going to sleep, then that's a good way to start developing a meditation practice and, improving it. She says, if you let weeks or months pass without meditating, you'll get out of shape and find it all the more difficult when you try again. Inevitably, there'll be times when the last thing you want to do is meditate, but meditate anyway, even for only a few minutes. Often, these sessions are the most productive. So that's regular practice. Then the next is a meditation place. So if possible, it's best to reserve a room or a corner, especially for your meditation sessions. So here we're kind of lucky. We have the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive where I live. We have this shrine room and library and pretty much a dedicated space that's not used for anything else. So if you have the luxury of a room that you can set up as a little shrine room, that's perfect, but if you don't, then at least if you have a corner of a room, you can put a screen around it and set up a little altar and have your cushion there and make that your meditation place, and not use that space for anything else. So set up your seat, either a cushion on the floor or a bed or a sofa or a straight back chair with a table or a low bench in front of you for this and other books that you need for your meditation. So, I have a bunch of meditation practices I do, and they're on the iPad. So what we don't do is put Dharma books on the floor or on a cushion that's used for sitting. If you've had teachings on refuge, then there are a number of do's and don'ts, and that include, so treating, these Dharma books show the path to enlightenment. And so in that, they're extremely precious, and we need to show them respect. They don't care, but it's a question of educating our mind to have an affinity for Dharma and a respect for it, as Dharma is what we want. Dharma is what protects us from suffering and leads us from happiness to happiness. So, extremely worthy of respect. So, if you could just have, well, anyway, most of you probably been to the center. We have these little, benches there, and then, we have these nice little cloths that Damcho brought back from Nepal, these brocade cloths that we put the books on. So, whatever you feel, however you feel, you can respect your Dharma books, but we don't put them on the floor, we don't step over them. And generally, these are all Dharma books, and we don't put, if you have other books like your Robert Ludlum model novels or something, put them on the lower shelf. Don't put them on the same shelf as your Dharma books. Keep your Dharma books higher than others, and you'll find, and you'll see at the center or in Tibetan monasteries, when they have their big altars with all the statues and the pictures of the lamas and so on, the books are kept in shelves above the altar, because even though the pictures of our teachers and of the Buddha and the statues and so forth represent the body and the mind, if you have a stupa, the mind of enlightenment, the teachings are the actual medicine that cure the suffering of samsara. So the books are kept in the highest place. Actually, when we moved in here several years ago, our plan was to build an altar like the one at the center, and we're going to get Damcho to do it actually, and then have shelves on the top for a number of books, but never quite got that together. So the books are to the side, but they're all Dharma books. They're not, and other books are kept in another room. But anyway, you may not have the luxury of that much space, but don't mix your non-Dharma books up with your Dharma books. So then she says, if you're so inclined, you can set up an altar nearby for statues or pictures that inspire you, and for offerings to the Buddha, such as candles, incense, flowers, and fruit, or water bowls. And usually the incense is, we don't put that on the altar so much. There's a, you can have an incense burner. Like, how can I point? Anyway, you get the idea. That's an incense burner it has a bed of, you can put rice or sand and then put the sticks of incense and they'll burn there. Ideally, the place should be clean and quiet where you won't be disturbed. So the extensive way of setting up the practice, of course, is in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. And there are these different preparatory rites, which Dr. Rinpoche spent 3 or 4 days doing. It takes up quite a bit of the early part of this book, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. So that's too extensive for us to deal with here. But if you want the professional way of doing it, then that's described in great detail in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. So ideally, the place should be clean and quiet, where you won't be disturbed. However, with discipline, it's possible to meditate in a crowded, noisy environment. People in prison, for example, often cannot find a quiet place and still become successful meditators. Even if your surroundings are busy and noisy, make your meditation place as pleasing and comfortable as possible so that you're happy to be there and can't wait to return. So choosing a practice, okay, so that's setting up a meditation place. Choosing a practice, so it's good to start with meditation on the breath. Okay, we did that. And there's a section on that here in this book. This ideal for calming the mind and starting to develop some insight into your thoughts and feelings. Both calm and insight are essential ingredients for successful meditations of any kind. Once you're familiar with meditation through, practicing breathing meditation, choose the practices that best suit your needs, remembering that all the techniques here are either antidotes to particular problems or methods for enhancing particular qualities. So she's talking about what in this book, many different kinds of meditations. If, for example, you're inclined towards anger, you could meditate on patience. So all these meditations are described here. Or loving kindness. If disturbed by strong desire or attachment, you'd benefit from meditating on impermanence and death or suffering. Depression can be counteracted by thinking about the preciousness and potential of the human life. So, when we talk about, the Lam Rim, stages of path to enlightenment, the outline of the text has these different sections. So, there are 4 main sections. The first one explains about the life and practices of a teacher who first arranged the 4 decades of the Buddha's teachings into what we call the Lamrim, the stages of the path, this kind of step-like arrangement of the teachings that make it easy to understand the whole path. It makes it easy to understand and practice by laying it out in a psychologically logical fashion. So it explains who Atisha was and what he did that makes him qualified to arrange the Buddha's teachings like that, through his deep understanding and experience. Then the second section explains about the qualities of the Lamrim teachings themselves, why this is such a great way to present the Buddha's teachings. And the third main section is how to study and how to teach the Lamrim. So there's advice there for students and for teachers. So that's kind of preamble. And then the fourth section is the main one that is actually, that's called, how disciples are led on the path to enlightenment. And so that's divided into two. There's the first division there is, how to generate devotion to the spiritual teacher, which is the root of the path. It's how Lama Tsongkhapa described the importance of the spiritual teacher, the root of the path. So just as the root of a tree or a plant needs to be healthy for the plant to grow well and bear flowers and fruit, so it's important that we find the right teacher and then develop a proper relationship. So I don't know if I've done that course at Kurukulla, but this book by Lama Zopa Rinpoche called The Heart of the Path. It's 400 or 500 pages of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's extensive teachings on Guru devotion. And, there's nothing like this in English. And it really, I felt this was kind of the best book I've ever read. And it really explains, how to practice, how to develop a healthy route for our Dharma practice, the heart of the path. And so that's the first main section of the Lamrim. And then the second part is having become devoted to the Guru and understood how to practice Guru devotion, then how to exhort ourselves, encourage ourselves, how to enthuse ourselves, how to stimulate ourselves to extract the essence from our perfect human rebirth. So devotion to the Guru and how to make the most of this incredibly precious, rare and precious life that we have. So the perfect human rebirth so the first part is how to recognize perfect human rebirth. Do I have one or not? So there are 18 attributes to perfect human rebirth. They're divided into 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses. So it explains in great detail what is a perfect life, perfect human life for being able to practice Dharma. So enthusing ourselves to extract the essence from the perfect human rebirth. And then the next part is how to extract the essence from the perfect human rebirth. And then that's divided into 3 levels of practice called the path of the being of lower capability, the path of the being of intermediate capability, the path of the being of greater capability. Or these are sometimes called the scopes, the three scopes. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche doesn't like the word scope. He doesn't think it's a very good translation of the Tibetan term. The Tibetan term implies, capacity for practice. So if you have small capacity for practice, you can only do so much, then there's that path. Then if you can do a bit more than that, then there's the middle path of the practitioner of intermediate capability. But if you can do it all and practice the teachings that lead to enlightenment, then that's the path for the being of great capability. He calls it lower capable being, middle capable being, and the great capable being. That literal translation doesn't work very grammatically for me very well, but you get the idea. So the lower path there is for those who understand cyclic existence, the six realms, and don't want to be reborn in the lower realms, the suffering realms, the animal realm, hungry ghost realm, and hell realm. So at least to avoid being reborn there and be reborn in the upper realms, those are the practices. But if you see the whole of cyclic existence, upper and lower realms, as a horrible prison that should only be escaped from, then the teachings at the middle level allow you to escape from cyclic existence for yourself alone. And if you feel that's not enough, that how can I save myself from suffering and leave everybody else behind? It's only going to work if everybody escapes from suffering, and the way to ensure that is by becoming enlightened, as we always say. So that those teachings are explained in the third, the higher level of the three. So those three paths of the lower, intermediate, and great beings of practitioners of lower, intermediate, and great capacity. That's really the main body of the teachings. That's where really the meat of all the teachings is in there. But the teaching on the perfect human rebirth, which is the one that comes after the Guru devotion teaching, that explains how rare and precious and how hard we had to work in our previous lives to get to where we are now, and what an incredible waste it is if we don't take advantage of this situation that we find ourselves in this perfect human body, this body that has everything we need to practice Dharma to the full. What incredible waste it is if we don't take advantage of this, and how hard we work to get here, and how hard it will be to find a rebirth like this again if we don't really set our minds to it. So that's the first injection of rocket fuel that we need to really give us the energy and the enthusiasm that we need to really accomplish this quite long path that has a lot of diversions and obstacles on the way. So to help us keep focused, keep our eye on the prize, enlightenment, and just keep working towards that and overcoming the obstacles and not getting distracted. So the beginning of that sort of mindset is to study and meditate on the perfect human rebirth. So that has, it explains what's perfect human rebirth, these 18 things, and how it's highly meaningful in that we can use this perfect human rebirth to obtain temporal goals. We can use it to attain ultimate goals of liberation and enlightenment. And we can even make every moment of this life, as I said before, whether we're meditating, whether we're studying teachings, whether we're working, whether we're eating, sleeping, watching TV, whatever, we can transform everything we do with bodhicitta to make everything we do a cause of enlightenment. So, this human rebirth with these 18 attributes gives us the opportunity to do all that. So it's extremely precious, but it's also rare because, as we see, if we understand these 18 attributes and then look around the world, how many other people have these 18 that we have? Even if we don't have 18, if we have 17 or 16 or 15, most people, barely have, 5 or 6. So, and that's people, most of the living beings on this earth aren't people. They're animals, the ones we can see. They're animals, insects, birds, fish. So, compared to the number of living beings on earth, even the ones we can see, forget about the other realms that we can't see. We can just see the human and animal realm. The hungry ghost realm, the hell realms, the God realms. We can't see that. We can't see them, and we have to rely on the descriptions of higher beings who have higher perception than we do, to understand that these realms are real, that they exist, but just on a different plane from our current one. But even if we just think of human beings and animals and insects and so forth, the beings in the animal realm, it's only a tiny minority of living beings just on this earth. And, there are so many, countless Earths. There's been some talk recently, scientists or astrologers have I can't remember the numbers, but there are hundreds of billions of planets throughout just in this galaxy, the Milky Way, that have atmospheric conditions that could sustain life similar to Earth. So this Earth isn't the only place where humans exist. There are countless human realms throughout infinite space, but even on this Earth, just that we can see, there's the number of living beings on this Earth. The animals, the beings in the animal world, vastly exceed the numbers of humans. And among the humans, there are very few that have, a tiny minority that have what we have, these conditions, these attributes that allow us to practice Dharma. And the reason is that all these lives, human, animals, and others, they're the result of a cause. And the cause is extremely difficult to create. It's much easier to create the cause to be born as an animal than it is to be born a human. That's why there are so many more animals than humans. So there's teaching on the perfect human rebirth that explains, what a perfect human rebirth is, with these 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses, and how it's highly meaningful in these 3 ways, and how rare and difficult it is to find, and how difficult it will be to find such a life again in the future. This understanding should, give us incredible energy to make the most of this life while it lasts, So on top of that, then the next teaching, so having sort of exhorted ourselves to extract the essence from this perfect human rebirth, then comes these 3 levels of teaching. And the first level of the path of the lower capable being is teaching on impermanence and death. So yes, we have this incredible perfect human rebirth, but we're going to die. It's going to finish. Not only that, but it could finish. It will finish relatively soon, and could finish much sooner than that. So death is certain, but the time of death is uncertain. And if we were to die now, without having spent time purifying our negative karma, without creating positive karma, causes for better rebirths, we would definitely be reborn in the lower realms. So that's the next teaching, is on impermanence and death. And, death isn't the real problem. What the real problem is what comes after death, if we haven't practiced Dharma. And that's the lower realm. So then the next teaching goes into great detail on the sufferings of the lower realms, which is, our definite destiny if we don't get our act together pretty quickly now. So all this little bundle of teachings here at the beginning of the path is given so that we do make the most of this opportunity that we have. So, so then after the teaching on the lower realms, after we've been properly freaked out, then and we think, oh my God, what do I do? Then comes a teaching on refuge. Then there's a solution. That it's not hopeless. There is a solution, and that's the refuge that's offered by Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So the Buddha is like the founder of the teachings. The Dharma is what he taught, and the Sangha is the community that helps us to practice. So that's likened to a doctor, medicine, the nurse. So the doctor, Buddha, makes a diagnosis and prescribes the medicine, the Dharma, which is something to be, like medicine, it's to be taken, to be practiced, not just to be looked at in a book, And then the Sangha are like the nurse that help us to take our medicine properly and on time, and so forth. So then the path continues. So these early teachings are really to give us perspective and generate the sort of unflagging determination to study and understand and practice the path. And the main way of practicing the path, there are ancillary things, but the main way is to meditate on these different steps. So impermanence and death, suffering, depression. Often we feel that things happen randomly or that life is unfair. If so, meditate on karma, law of cause and effect. If you regret the harm you've done to others or feel hopeless and don't believe you can change, do one of the purification practices. So there are 2 or 3 of those laid out here. We may do something. If you're overwhelmed by suffering of the world and want to develop the courage to help others, meditate on compassion and Tonglen. Tonglen, do you know? Tonglen is taking on the suffering of others and giving others happiness and benefit. It's a meditation we do. So, one of the so-called thought transformation meditations. When your mind is tranquil, it's good to develop concentration with the visualization technique that appeals to you, or deepen your insight into the meaning of reality by meditating on emptiness. If you appreciate the benefits of devotional practices, you can incorporate prostrations and prayers or choose a visualization meditation. So all these things are in the book. All this is meant as a general guide only. With practice, you'll learn to know what to do when. However, the importance of being guided by an experienced meditator cannot be overemphasized. So that's a little section on choosing a practice. So a lot of things to choose from, just even in this, small book. So then the next point is talking about short sessions. In the beginning, it's best to meditate for short periods, 10 to 30 minutes, and end your session while mind and body are still comfortable and fresh. If you push yourself to meditate too long and rise from your seat with an aching body and a frustrated mind, you won't have much interest in sitting down to meditate again. I think Lama Yeshe said, if you don't get to the stage where you meditate for too long and then next time you look at your meditation cushion, you feel like vomiting. That's not good. Meditation should be satisfying and productive experience, not a burden. So you should decide beforehand on a period of time for the session and stick to it, even if the meditation is going well. As your skill develops, you can increase the length of your sessions accordingly. So this is also advice for retreat. When we do intensive retreats, for a weekend or a week or a month or 3 months is quite common. So then when we're doing that sort of meditation, generally we do we want to get to 4 sessions a day, but to build up to that, we do maybe, 8 or 10 short sessions, just 10, 15 minutes, and gradually build up to it. It's sort of like weightlifting, start with the lower weights and you build up the heavier ones. Lighter weight, more reps, and then as you want to really build up, then you use heavier weights and fewer reps. So it kind of works with the mind as well in terms of the duration of the session. So, and Lama Yeshe likened it when you're doing, say, a longer retreat, say 3 months, then he said it's like a barley grain. So the barley grain is pointed at both ends. So you start with short sessions and you gradually increase them so till they're about 2 hours long. And then as you're nearing the end of the retreat, you've got, maybe a couple of weeks to go or something, then you start decreasing them and then tail off to the other point. So like that's in a retreat. So then be relaxed but alert. The mind and body should be relaxed and comfortable throughout the session. So also, it's just not it's not only our mind that has to get used to it, it's our body as well. So, if we're not used to sitting cross-legged on the floor, most of us aren't, then that's also something we need to work on, to build up, so that our knees and our hips gradually get used to that posture. And I think it's you don't have to sit cross-legged on the floor on a cushion. And when we do, we have this. We have these two cushions, don't we? We have the. Can you see? We have this large one. We have them like when you go to the center. You have this big one called the Zabuton, which is the bottom one, and then under your backside you have this small cushion called a zafu. I think they're probably Japanese terms. I don't know what the Tibetans call them. But the small one under your buttocks is to have your backside slightly higher than your knees. If you sit like that, it's easier to keep your back straight. So, so when we're sitting cross-legged, so if you're trying to do a long retreat, you can do it in a chair, but if at all possible, physically possible, it's better to learn to sit cross-legged on a cushion. That's much easier to maintain for hours at a time, if that's what you're aiming for. So again, as you're training your body to sit, you want to not push it too much at the beginning, otherwise you'll do some damage. Okay. So mind and body should be relaxed and comfortable throughout the session. You can relax mentally by firmly deciding to leave behind all your problems, worries and involvements of the external world, and immerse yourself in your inner world. Easier said than done. It might help to recall a past experience of feeling at ease and contentment, and then generate that same feeling on your meditation seat. Breathing meditation can also bring the same result. Observing the gentle, natural rhythm of the breath and avoiding distracting thoughts, your mental state gradually becomes tranquil and clear, but don't fall asleep. So I always mention the distracting, disturbed mind, which is the commonest interference, even when we're doing breathing meditation, our mind won't stay still. It's like they call the monkey mind. It just wants to run everywhere, But the other hindrance is Lama Yeshe called sluggishness. And especially if we close our eyes when we're meditating, because usually we associate closing our eyes with going to sleep. And so that's why experienced meditators, and even some beginners, try to meditate with their eyes just slightly open. That lets a little bit of light in and can help keep your mind awake. So you'll see, in the paint of the tankas of the Buddha, the statues, the Buddha's eyes aren't closed, they're slightly open. So that lets in some light and can counteract going to sleep. But the downside of that is that if you're not experienced at meditating with your eyes even slightly open, then it's more easy to get distracted by what's in front of you, by visual objects in front of you. So you have to figure out how to do it. So usually people start by meditating with their eyes lightly closed, but at the same time awareness of the danger of falling asleep. So looking out for that and not letting it happen. Stay alert. Take note of whatever thoughts, images, feelings, and sensations arise in your mind without becoming involved in them. So that's another skill, to remain focused. So we're focused on the breath, and these different thoughts come, and we don't let them distract us. And our little sentry is watching for them, trying to deflect them. Or you can just note, oh, there's a thought. It's like watching a cloud float by in the sky, There goes a thought. But keeping the main part of your mind on your breath. So whether it's thoughts or, pain in your knee or something like that, try not to let it distract you. Your main focus of attention should always be the breath or whatever subject you've chosen to meditate on. Physical relaxation can be facilitated by the practice of such disciplines as yoga, tai chi, kumye, or other stress reduction and relaxation methods. Kumye is a Tibetan method of relaxation. I'm not very familiar with it. But anyway, stretching and yoga, especially, for your legs and your back, then that can help you sit, Any means you use to ease physical tension, improve your ability to sit in meditation is a valuable addition to your practice. So that's be relaxed but alert. No expectations. Since we all want to enjoy happiness and peace of mind and avoid problems, it's natural to want good experience during meditation. But such expectations are not necessarily realistic and are likely to hinder your progress. The mind is complex and ever-changing. One day you might have a calm, joyful meditation, and the next a meditation beset by distractions and turmoil. This is quite normal and should not cause worry or frustration. Be ready for anything and do not be disturbed by whatever happens. The most troublesome, painful experiences can be the most valuable in terms of the growth of wisdom. Feel satisfied that you're making the effort to meditate and transform your mind. That itself is meditation. As long as you're trying, it's mistaken to think that you can't meditate. Results take time. Don't be discouraged if you've not achieved good concentration within a few weeks. It's better to think in terms of years. Habits built up over a lifetime are not eliminated instantly, but by gradual cultivation of new habits. So remember, the Tibetan word for meditation is gom. So literally, gom means familiarization. So at the moment, our mind is familiarized with attachment and anger and jealousy and pride and distraction and sleepiness and all these things. That's not meditation, even though we're very familiar with them. It's familiarization of our mind with positive things like, love, compassion, concentration. We talked about the different mental factors, the positive, the 11 virtuous mental factors last time, didn't we? And I think we sent out those references, Bob. Yeah. So there, a lot of those positive mental states are what we're trying to familiarize our mind with. Gom, making your mind familiar, and making our mind familiar with the breath. And and then positive things like love, compassion, wisdom, and so forth. So be easy on yourself, recognize your capabilities and limitations, and evaluate your progress accordingly. So remember, one of the first retreats Lama Yeshe gave us in the early 70s. He'd given some early individual students different retreats, but the first one he gave a bunch of us, there were in January 74, about 10 of Lama Yeshe's Western students got ordained as monks and nuns. And there were 3 or 4 others who'd been ordained previously. And there were quite a lot of lay students around the monastery in Nepal after the 6th meditation course, which was in the spring of 74. And Lama Yeshe said, okay, now this is the year we all get serious, and we're going to do some serious purification. So that was the first longish retreat, the first longish sadhana practice he gave us. The sadhana is S-A-D-H-A-N-A. Sadhana is translated as a method of accomplishment. So, in this book, there are lots of sadhanas. I don't even know if she calls them sadhanas, but it's not in the index. But a sadhana is, it's a sort of formal practice. Usually we start, with refuge and generating bodhicitta, and then maybe, like we do a little bit at the center before teachings, generate 4 immeasurables, and then you can do some breathing meditation, and then there can be a visualization, and then doing some offerings, and then more visualization, and then a mantra recitation, and then there's some concluding practices. So that little packet of practices is called a sadhana, or a method of accomplishment. So if it's a deity practice, if we're meditating on Buddha of compassion, Chenrezig, or Manjushri, Buddha of wisdom, or Vajrasattva, Buddha of purification, Tara, all these different deities have their own sadhana practices. So Lama Yeshe said, the first thing we need to do is rid our mind of bad habits through purification. So he gave us the Vajrasattva initiation and teachings on that practice, and then sent everybody off into retreat, probably 30 or 40 people altogether. So there was a group retreat in Kathmandu at the monastery in the Gompa, in the shrine room. I think maybe 20, 25 people did that, led by Canadian nun who was Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teaching assistant at the time. And a bunch of us went off into the mountains in Nepal for the summer in different places. So Laudo is where Lama Zopa Rinpoche lived in his previous life, and where he was, that area where he was born in Solakumbu, up towards Mount Everest. Laudo is, and he's known there as the Laudo Lama. In his previous life, he lived there and spent the last 20 years of his life in meditation in the cave up there, and then he passed away, and he was reborn in a village not far from there called Tangme, and then he was recognized when he was 2 or 3 years old as the reincarnation of that Lama who'd passed away at Laudo. And in that previous life, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's previous life, the Laudo Lama had been asked by the local people to build a monastery where they could send their children to study and learn to read and write and become monks. And he'd said he was too old, but he'd come back and do it in his next life. So anyway, when he was 10, a couple of uncles took him on pilgrimage to Tibet, and they went to southern Tibet, and they finished up at a place called Domo, and that was the monastery of Tibetan Lama called Domo Rinpoche, Domo Geshe Rinpoche. And I don't know if any of you read Lama Govinda's book, The Way of the White Clouds, but Domo Geshe Rinpoche's previous life was, anyway, that's the monastery of Domo Geshe Rinpoche, who was the teacher of Lama Govinda, who was a German who became his disciple. And he wrote this book called The Way of the White Clouds about his pilgrimage in Tibet. And so Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche and his uncles finished up at that monastery in southern Tibet, not far from Bhutan. And when it came time to go back to Nepal, Lama Zopa Rinpoche said he didn't want to leave, he wanted to stay there. So that kind of freaked out his uncles a little bit. So there was a bit of a dispute about that. And they took the dispute to the abbot, and the abbot said, well, since Lama is since he's a reincarnate Lama, he knows more than we do. So he was about 10 at the time. So they said, whatever he wants to do, that's what we're going to let him do. So they had to leave him behind. So he stayed there for 3 years at the monastery, learning different things that they learn in the monasteries. And then came 59, and a lot of Tibetans fled Tibet. So they fled, Rinpoche fled with Tibet at that time and finished up. And Domo Geshe Rinpoche had a monastery, had a branch monastery in Darjeeling in India, northeast India. But anyway, he finished up going to the Tibetan refugee camp in Baksadwar in West Bengal, further northeast than Darjeeling. And that's where he met Lama Yeshe and became Lama Yeshe's student. But they sometimes used to go down to Darjeeling to Domo Geshe Rinpoche's monastery, and that's where they met Zina Rashevsky, their first Western student. And you know, the rest's history. That's why we're here, because of her. And she had read Lama Govinda's book, The Way of the White Clouds. I have a first edition of it somewhere. And she was looking for Domo Geshe Rinpoche. So Lama Govinda's Domo Geshe Rinpoche had passed away and been reborn. And so the current Domo Geshe Rinpoche was around somewhere. Actually, he was living in Delhi, but he had this monastery, and she was looking for him. And one story goes, there's different stories actually. One story goes that she came to the monastery looking for Domo Geshe Rinpoche, and the monk who met her thought she meant Lama Zopa Rinpoche, because he'd also been nicknamed Domo Geshe Rinpoche because he'd stayed in Domo for a number of years. And a lot of these Rinpoches are named, like Ling Rinpoche, they're named after the place. It's not their actual name. They're just the Rinpoche from that place, you know. So she met Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa inadvertently like that. And then this whole organization, FPMT, started from that. So a bunch of us went up to, so then after a couple of years after the Lamas met Zina, she couldn't stay in India for visa reasons, I think. So anyway, she and the lamas went to Nepal, to Bodhanath near Kathmandu, and then Rinpoche went back and met his family again, and then in that's in about 68, and then in about 1970, 71, 69, they went back to Laudo for the first time since he'd left with his uncles, and then this idea to build a monastery came, and then through Zena and other Western students, they raised the money and they built the monastery. And so a bunch of us went up there, and some of the students did retreat in the monastery. Then Lamzopa, the monastery had a house nearby, so 3 of the nuns did a group retreat, Vajrasattva retreat there. And there was another nunnery down the hill. One of the students did retreat there, one of the Western monks, and I did my retreat in a cave called the Charok Cave, and which was about 15 minutes from the monastery. And another monk did retreat in a small cave above the Charok Cave where I was. And then a couple of the other Western students did a retreat in a small house just below the Laudo Monastery. So we were scattered all over the mountain there. And Lama Yeshe, and our job was to do this Vajrasattva retreat. And you know, the job is to do 100,000 long Vajrasattva mantras in the context of the Vajrasattva sadhana that Lama Yeshe had put together for us. And he'd given a commentary on that. So that sadhana and Lama Yeshe's commentary that he gave us, other teachings, are published in a book called Becoming Vajrasattva, that was published by Wisdom in 94, 95. And so that's Lama Yeshe's collected teachings on Vajrasattva. But during that retreat, so I was in this cave, and I was reading this, I was starting to practice, to do the practice and getting myself set up for the 3-month retreat, and going through the sadhana, you know, a couple of times a day, and reading the commentary and figuring out how to do it. And as I was reading the commentary, there were a few places that Lama Yeshe had made certain comments, and a couple of times he'd actually referred to me. You know, often during his teachings, he would take the mickey out of somebody or other, and, you know, make jokes about people and stuff. And a couple of times he mentioned me like that, but I kind of got a little, for whatever reason, I thought, you know, it's like, is it the White Album? Playing the White Album backwards. You think Paul McCartney is giving you some secret message or something. As I was reading this sadhana, I thought Lama Yeshe was giving me this secret message that I'm going to die in this retreat, you know. I really convinced myself that that was the message I was getting. So I got really annoyed at first, because I thought, well, if he knows I'm going to die, why is he sending me up here to the mountains, you know, where there's like, you know, there's no medical help at all. The only doctor around is me. And you know, but then I thought, well, you know, even if you're in the West, even if you go to hospital, people die, you know, so maybe if I'm going to die, my karma's up, my life is going to be over, then this is probably the best place to be, in a purification retreat. At least I might die with a slightly better mind, you know. But anyway, but I got really paranoid about it. So as it happened, so over at the monastery, 15 minutes away, there were all the young monks that had joined the monastery. So what happened was that he built this monastery, Rinpoche, the Laudo Lama had built this monastery, and in 71, I think the first 5 monks were ordained, and then more young monks were sent there. And then in the winter, it was pretty harsh up there. It's at 14,000 feet. So they all went down to Kopan, to our monastery near Kathmandu, and so there are about 30 young monks. So in the summer, in the winter they were there at Kopan, and in the summer they'd go up to Laudo, which is where most of them came from, and their families were there and so on. And then in the winter they go back down to Kopan. So this went on 72, 73, 74, and the monastery was growing. The Tibetan monastery was growing, and it was by 75 there were too many monks to easily go up and down and to get enough food for them up there and everything. So then that up and down stopped. So this is 74. So I think this is the last time they all went up. And so, but this is 74, they were there, about 30 of them, and with their teacher Lama Lundup from Kopan. So I went over to see him, and I said, "Look, I think Lama Yeshe's telling me I'm going to die in this retreat. Did he give you any instructions what to do when I die? Any special ceremonies or anything to do? God, he just about fell over laughing. He said, "Oh, that's great. You have a very good understanding of impermanence. Yes, it's true. Anybody can die at any time. And I was like, "Oh, thanks a lot. That's no help. He said, "Anyway, yeah, it's possible you might die. So I was, So anyway, so I kind of reconciled myself to the fact that I might die, and I tell you, that really focused my mind. So when I got into the retreat and started, doing the practice and the mantra recitations and so on, whenever my mind started wandering off, I said, "Come on, you're going to die up here. You don't have time to let your mind wander. Just keep focused. Do this purification, And so that, I wouldn't call it a realization, not even close to a realization, but it was, some understanding that, death is certain, time of death is certain, and for whatever reason, Lama Yeshe foresaw that, I may not get out of there alive. So, and experience the benefit of that feeling of impermanence and impending death. So 100,000 mantras, actually you do 110, there's sort of an insurance of another extra 10,000 to make up for the ones where your mind wanders. Well, it's usually a lot more than 10%. And that's why we do have, one reason you have 108 beads on the rosary. So then you do 100,000 rosaries. That's 108,000 mantra recitations. So I'd done about 20 or 25,000, and there's quite a complicated visualization that you're supposed to do. You have to visualize Vajrasattva above the crown of your head, and it's this image with all these different attributes and things, and purifying nectars, and it's like, but the main thing is to try and visualize the deity clearly above the crown of your head. And after about 25,000, I wasn't visualizing a thing. It was just all imaginary. I couldn't really see. I couldn't see Vajrasattva, So, I had some expectation, as Sangha says not to, and Kathleen MacDonald, and but I thought, okay, this is no good. I have to start again. So I tossed out the 25,000 mantras that I'd done, and I started counting over. And then I did another 10,000, another 20,000. When I got to the second 20,000, I still couldn't get a clear visualization. So I thought, oh, screw this. I'm just going to count those other ones as well. So all of a sudden I jumped up to 45,000, nearly halfway through. And, by the end of the retreat, the visualization still was a little better maybe, but, still nothing to write home about. So, so I gave up the expectation and just did the best I could, And so then I finished the retreat. I did, 110, or maybe I finished up doing 120,000 altogether, So, and, it was a really fantastic experience, even though my visualization was terrible. But really by the end, I was so happy in that cave, and honestly, even now, I still look back on that as probably the best time in my life, and there was, as I mentioned, there was this nunnery down the mountain where one of the other monks, Thupten Pende, was doing his retreat, and I'd kind of hired one of the nuns. Her brother was actually a monk at the monastery at Kopan, and I'd hired her to go to the market for me every other week and buy what I needed. So vegetables and some curd and different things. And I brought up a bunch of stuff with me, rice and potatoes and tsampa, Tibetan barley flour, and the staples I brought up with me from Kathmandu. And so every couple of weeks she'd go to the market. The market was in Namche Bazaar, which is about a 2 or 3 hour walk away. If you're going to Mount Everest, you go to Namche Bazaar. In those days, you flew to a place called Lukla, and then you walked for a day or two from there to Namche Bazaar, and then Everest base camp was over northeast, and Laudo was pretty much due west. So they had a market every Saturday morning. So she would go there and bring me what I needed. And then when she came back and left the stuff at the gate, I had a little compound outside the cave. She would leave the stuff at the gate, and then I left a note, a shopping list for the next time. So it worked like that. So, that's what I survived on. And so I really didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay there. I thought I could stay here the rest of my life, Might be short, but it was just, such a great experience. I can't tell you. And, but as it happened, the Lamas, in that summer, they made their first trip to the West. Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they went to the States. They went to Australia and New Zealand. And Anila Ann, the nun who'd led the group retreat at Kopan Monastery, accompanied them to Australia, and a new centre started in Australia called Chenrezig Institute. And the Lamas, she had been Lama Zopa's Rinpoche's teaching assistant at the Kopan courses up to that point. But they'd asked me to be the teaching assistant at the next course in the fall of 74. So I had this job waiting for me, so I couldn't stay. I had to come down. So anyway, so I finished the retreat, and walking down the mountain out of that retreat back to Lukla to catch the plane, the little plane back to Kathmandu. I felt like one of those guys escaping from death row after the DNA analysis. I escaped a death sentence. I was going to die, but here I am. I'm still alive, and I'm walking down the mountain. So I dodged a bullet right there. So that's the story of persisting and not having expectations, and a man knowing his limitations, as Clint Eastwood said. So, the need for a teacher. The most effective way to learn anything is to study with someone who's already mastered it, and meditation is no exception. The mind can be compared to a musical instrument. In order to create beautiful music with it, we need to study with a master who knows the instrument inside and out. And in order to develop a clear, enthusiastic, and loving mind, we need the guidance of someone who thoroughly understands how the mind works and how it can be transformed. However, it's not easy to find a qualified teacher. This book, To Heart of the Path, explains all the different qualities of a teacher that we need to look for in the different qualities we need to look for in a teacher before we make that commitment, make that sort of guru-disciple relationship or teacher-student relationship. Therefore, it might be a matter of years before you meet the right teacher, but don't think you should set out on a frantic guru hunt. Take it easy. When the time is right, you'll meet the person who can guide you successfully. I think you have to make some effort. In the meantime, you can practice meditations such as those explained here in this book and seek the advice of any practitioner whose qualities you admire. So even if the person has been meditating for only a short time, your own innate wisdom, your inner guru, will tell you whether or not you're heading in the right direction. And then finally, don't advertise. Whenever we discover something new and interesting, we feel like telling everyone about it. But it's not a good idea to talk too much about your meditation. Unless someone is sincerely interested and asks you about it, it's better to keep quiet. Broadcasting your experiences will dissipate whatever good energy and insight you've gained. It's best to discuss your practice only with your teacher and a few close friends. Having taken up meditation, there's no need to make big changes in your lifestyle, behavior, or appearance. You can keep your job and your friends, continue to live in your nice house, and just enjoy life as usual. Meditation is an internal, not external activity. Your practice will transform your mind on a subtle level, making you more sensitive and clear and giving you fresh insight into ordinary day-to-day experiences. Superficial changes are not natural and are unlikely to impress anyone, but deep natural changes created by meditation are real and beneficial both for yourself and others. So if you have this book, Bob, did you get everyone's email address before, or?
Not everybody sent it, but many people sent. I think I got about 6 addresses. 6 or 7.
Can't hear you.
I received about 6 or 7 addresses.
Oh, sorry. Unmute yourself.
So I got about 6 or 7 addresses.
Okay, so Bob at kurukulla.org.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll send you a couple of meditations to send to everybody that you guys can practice between now and next week. If you don't have this book, I do strongly recommend it. It's there are big variety of meditations, and we're not going to get to nearly any of them. So it's a really valuable handbook that you can go into and practice for years to come. But anyway, so I'll mention a couple of meditations in there that you can do, and for those who don't have it, I'll send a couple of meditations to Bob, and he can send them out. Is that okay, Bob? So I'll do that tonight.
That's fine.
Do that tonight or tomorrow morning. Okay, so I think that's it for tonight. So we began by generating bodhicitta for this session. So this whole session really has, we've pretty much kept on track, I think. So, and we've been talking about the meditation as taught by the Buddha. So, having started with bodhicitta, we really, the whole session has been a very powerful cause for enlightenment. So in order to protect the merit, the positive energy that we've created, we, as usual, will dedicate the merit. So, proper action has right motivation, right action, right dedication, those three. So think, because of this merit, may I quickly reach enlightenment in order to enlighten all sentient beings. Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you next week.